Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and in this episode, we sit down with Nathan Coe Marsh. Nathan is a real pro and a real worker in the world of magic, and in this episode, you're going to learn exactly what that takes. He's going to teach you how to get good. He's going to teach you how to get new material to be better, how to write, how to script, how to rehearse. He's going to teach you the business side of magic, how to book gigs, how to have a full pipeline. This man literally knows his stuff backwards and forwards, and that's why he is a pro. You're going to learn a ton, and you're going to love this as much as I do. Here it is, a wonderful episode with the one and only Nathan Coe Marsh. Hello, my friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with the one and only Nathan Coe Marsh. Nathan, how are you?
Doing great, Jonah. Awesome to be here.
I am super excited to have you on. I've been seeing a lot of your stuff online for a little while, not just your sharings on social medias, but your Penn and Teller spot. And then Ben and I decided to bring you in for a Toronto Magic Company show while I was away. So I missed the show and you slept in my bed, and now I feel like we've got some unfinished business. So I'm super excited to have you on and talk magic. How are you?
Doing great. So
let's start at the very beginning where we usually do. How did you get started in magic?
So I was about 11 years old, and a friend of my dad's, Mark Stock, painter from LA, was really into Charlie Chaplin, and at one point had assembled a dinner party of all the domestics who had worked with Chaplin throughout his life, just to tell stories about him. A very kind of odd, quirky guy who liked to do amazing, unusual, surprising things for people. So he was an amateur magician and would do John Kennedy's floating dollar. And I was sitting at the dinner table, about 11 years old. He borrowed a dollar bill, put it in midair, and I just freaked out. And it was probably a couple nights just staying up, thinking about all the different ways this thing could have happened, and hanging out at the, going back to the dinner table and like being like, where could the electronics have been placed? And what's the, And what's interesting, because I would never, ever do this with somebody who's into magic now, his response when he was told how interested I was in that was, oh yeah, that's John Kennedy's floating dollar. It's $20 at Hollywood Magic. And what's weird is that made it like more exciting, because it was like, how could they possibly sell the amazing electronics, the incredible, alien technology that must be underneath this for $20? And that's kind of the conventional version of the story that I told for years, and it's true. And it did grab me, and it was just this incredible moment. But I think part of it is leading up to that. My dad had been talking about Mark's magic a lot, and my dad's an amazing dad, and he's fantastic. But I think that there was a part of me that was like, hey, if I could do something like that, maybe I'd be getting the same level of attention from him. Maybe it would find, and so I think that was a part of it too. And I mentioned that because more and more, I think that's a really common starting point in magic, right? Is like, it's, if I can do something amazing, people will find me more interesting. And the unifying thread in a lot of bad magic that I see, and in a lot of the habits that lead to bad magic, kind of being very, very protective of getting criticism, of taking things very, very personally, is just the dynamic that sometimes we're still in that space of it being a replacement for some kind of social thing, or of the audience kind of being there to serve us rather than us being there to serve them. And it's one of the basic questions that I kind of ask when I'm looking at a performer is when you get down to it, is the audience here serving this person, or is this person here really serving the audience and really like, hey, I've got something amazing to share with you. This is so cool, and I'm excited to share this with you, versus using it to kind of prop something up.
I totally resonate with that idea of people getting into magic to not just to be a replacement for being interesting, but also I find it really common. I know it was for me and a lot of people that I grew up with in magic, was being almost to have something to use to interact with these people that are older than us and smarter than us and wiser than us. And like, you want this thing that allows you to talk up to these grown-ups or to the, you know, people that have real things going on. And I distinctly remember my aunt saying to me, like, Jonah, you're ahead of your years, you know, like, you're so, and I was doing someone else's trick, right? But it felt like that really hit the spot of me saying, like, yeah, like, I am smart enough. So I definitely resonate with that idea. I want to continue. How did that journey continue for you?
Yeah, so for years it was just a hobby, and it was something that I intensely studied. I was terribly shy about performing. I remember, I think I know for a fact, David Roth's hanging coins was the first trick I would share for anyone else, and my hands would just tremble and shake as a 14 or 15-year-old. And so I was very hesitant about performing. And right at the end of high school, I got a job teaching magic at a local summer camp, which led to a job teaching magic at a summer camp in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. That opportunity was open to me because a remarkable performer out of Austin, Brad Henderson, was doing tours of these affluent summer camps over the summer and spending 2 weeks performing shows, doing hypnosis, doing magic, teaching magic classes. And they loved that so much, and they had such a positive experience with that they were open to, there was one camp that was open to the idea of, hey, let's have a counselor who's teaching a magic class all summer. And Brad became, and it's funny because in retrospect, and I had no clue about this as a kid, I didn't realize like how threatening that would be to a real working professional, you know, who's doing this and being well taken care of, to suddenly here's this kid who's also teaching a magic class. And the way Brad handled that was incredibly classy, incredibly graceful, and he really became a mentor and a teacher, to the point where my very first professional gig came out of that camp. And I was in a dorm room in college, and I had no idea, you know, oh, this person wants to hire me. How much should I charge? What are all these details? And he stayed on the phone with me from like 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., literally reading me his contract over the phone so I could write it down on my word processor. It was a bar mitzvah in Manhattan. And so he was calling, I think, Seth Kramer to find out, hey, what should this kid charge as like not being way too low for the market appropriate. And so it was a really weird introduction to show business too, because it was a crazy amount of money for what my level of expertise was. But the truth was the kid just wanted me at his party, right? To back up a little bit, that summer, that first full summer kind of teaching that's when I really got the performing bug, because about halfway through, the camp administrators asked me if I'd be willing to do a show for the kids. And I said yes. And I'd done individual tricks for people, but I'd never strung together an entire show. And in about 3 weeks, I literally wrote the show, put it together. And that first night, it was about half the audience were the kids who were kind of in my bunk, along with some other counselors. And so they already, you know, you're in your 20s, they already look up to you, they admire you, they think you're cool, they want you to do well. And that first night, I just freaking killed. And that feeling you get when you're really connected to an audience and you walk out and there's this huge endorphin rush when you get off stage and you're in rhythm where it feels like you can't do anything wrong. Like, I got that literally the first show, not because I was so good or anything, but just because of the circumstances of that show. And I got hooked on that. I realized that was what I meant to do. And I really believe, I love magic for itself, but I really believe that addiction to performing, that addiction to connecting with strangers, that addiction to structuring something in a way that really builds momentum and carries people and takes them through, that would be there if, as a kid, I'd fallen in love with juggling, or if I'd learned to write jokes, or if I was a guitar player. You know, the medium is almost... And magic is special because I really believe that the state that we can bring people to, you know, what Whit Hayden talks about that place that you bring them where intellectually they know it's not real, but it's so emotionally convincing that it feels so real that it puts them into this on the horns of a dilemma, as he says, which is absolutely true. And there's no script, there's no pat response for dealing with that. And so kind of the mask that people wear in ordinary, scripted, typical social interactions slips, and you get these. It's what made David Blaine's first special so compelling. Is you see these really genuine. People are kind of shocked into like really being in the moment and really responding, and all the social stuff slips and they'll scream or whatever. But that's special about magic. That's you can get a great aesthetic experience from an extraordinary painting. You can get taken to a different place by an incredible piece of music, but nothing else gives you that same experience. So I'm very much in love with magic, but that's where the performing bug bit hard.
There's a few things I want to touch on there. The first is that I love that your intro to this was summer camps. That is literally how I got started doing magic seriously, is summer camp tours, going to multiple camps, kind of doing this sort of thing, growing. And now it's still a very big part of my business, touring summer camp. So that's really awesome. And just something for me to mention about it, about you did classes, right? You taught the kids
Sure.
magic.
Yes. Yep.
So one awesome thing about summer camps, and I wish this upon any magician who is starting out, is if you're doing classes every day, it means you're like performing every day, and it means you like really build chops. Yes. So I wish upon any magician for them to be severely underpaid and overworked for their first magic gig, because only their first one. When it goes on, then they can. Then I want them all to be rich and make lots of money. But for their first one, I want them to work 10 times the hours that they should for 1/10 of the money, and just keep doing it over and over and over again, because you learn, you go from what am I saying to I love what I'm saying to I hate this, why am I saying this, to like now I am one with this script. Then you get to look at it again. You get the kind of repetition that one only gets from being successful for 20 years and performing on big stages every day, but you get it like in a real test condition. So that's just one thing I wanted to reflect on, because I think it's such a great.
And I think that one thing that's important too and different about teaching it is it forces, especially as a young performer, teaching it forces you to really break it down beat by beat, moment by moment. What are you saying? What are you doing? What makes it so that this is something that's going to be really deceptive in the hands of a 7-year-old, or deceptive in the hands of a 7-year-old, right? And so, yeah, I agree with you 10,000%. Like there's something, and we can talk in a little bit about where those flight time gigs came from for me when I was coming up, because I do believe that, those first few years of you don't have anything to sell yet. Those first few years are purely about building a product that is worthy of putting it out on the market and making the money that you deserve to make.
Totally. The second thing I wanted to touch on there was just that rush of the first show. In some lens, it kind of feels a little bit like the, trying to impress your dad kind of thing, where it's like, oh, great, there's a whole audience of people clapping for me. But in another sense, there's also this incredible feeling that is unlike anything else to conduct the emotions of an audience. And particularly when it gets to, when it's really singing, like you're mentioning, when it's just clicking and bop, 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 on all cylinders, there is nothing like that feeling. And in some ways, like the reason I brought up that like bigger scale version of impressing your dad kind of thing is because some people might think of that as being very selfish, like they're clapping for me, yay, that's why I love this so much. But I think it has the opportunity to be very selfless. And I also think there is literally no feeling like an entire room thinking together, existing together, breathing together, wowing together, everything like that. So it's amazing that you got that on your first go, whether it's because you had, classes with all these kids for the first 2.5 weeks, so they all knew and liked and trust you. I'm sure that played a really big role, but it's still such an amazing feeling, and it's no surprise that was part of why you caught the bug.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough, I don't think it is a bigger version of the yay, they're clapping and whatnot. I think that when the performance really is working, the thing that you love is the connection between you and them. And that's different. It's not about validating you, it's not about pushing you up. It really, it's like dancing. It is this exchange of, I give them energy, they give me energy, and Yeah, I'm not explaining it well, but it is very different than just, oh, I'm being validated because they like what I'm doing.
1,000,000%. And I think anybody who has really done a show that's like really, really singing knows what we're talking about. And if you don't, then you got something to work towards. You caught the bug, you started teaching it, you started performing it. Where did you really start performing, and how did you, like, what kind of major resources or mentors or anything like that really positioned you in the world of magic?
I took what both I and my parents thought was going to be a year off between undergrad and graduate school, and
And the year
I focused,
continues. The
and it's
longest
still
year ever.
here we are 16 years later. I went to a dinner theater in Sarasota, Florida, the Golden Apple Dinner Theater, which no longer exists. Talked to the owners, talked them into, hey, you guys have an hour before the show where people are eating, they're expecting entertainment, nothing's happening. How about having me visit the tables? And so I pitched them on that. But they could only afford that one night a week. So the deal I struck with them was, hey, listen, you guys decide what night of the week you guys want me. Is it Thursday? Is it Friday? Is it Saturday? You guys are paying for that night. I will show up. I will do that night. It will be amazing. But I'm trying to get good at this, right? So are you all right with me showing up on other nights? And I'm under no obligation to, but if I feel like it, coming out and working the tables for you guys, and you don't have to pay me, I don't have to be there, but so I went there 6 or 7 nights a week for 6 months.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Severely underpaid and overworked. That is how you get good early in magic. There's no other way.
And then after that 6 months, a buddy from the Magic Club that I grew up in was producing a show at a comedy club, and he gave me some time. The comedy club owner came out, and he liked my stuff. And so I started on Friday nights doing 10 minutes in the full comedy club show. And that was a terrifying part of my career because I would come up and it would be incredible and I would feel like I was on top of the world and I'd be walking out in that huge endorphin rush, or everything would just fall apart. It was a bunch of drunk people who were there to see comedy, and who is this kid doing magic tricks? And, that was my place to just go up and be on stage. And I really, really, really needed that. The big resources at that time, I had saved up, and I did Bob Fitch's 7-day performers intensive, which is basically like a really intense theater training for a week for magicians, and vocal training, and, let's take a piece of yours and let's take it apart and put it back together. And that was very, very important to me in terms of having a baseline of skills of communicating well, and not just communicating well, but and it was weird at first because the first time I went, it was me and the students were Brad Henderson and Doc Hilford and Paul Gertner. It was this really intimidating experience because it was like being at a magic convention where I was the only attendee. And I was, my work was in Bob Sheets, and this was my, first year of doing magic shows publicly, and it was nothing like theirs. And it was a really, really intimidating but really important experience because what I saw in those critique sessions were the questions that they were asking of their material, ranging from the small, Fitch's emphasis on, where does this prop come from? Where does this prop go? These very small concerns, to watching how somebody changed if they, led from their chest in the way they were moving, or if they led from a different area as they're moving across the stage, or if they did it with a bigger energy or a smaller energy, and all of those things. And that was really powerful for me too, in terms of learning how to direct myself when I came to developing and working on my own material. So that was really powerful. When I was doing these comedy clubs, I was basically, let me this week, performing close-up magic at the tables at the dinner theater, and let me work on linking rings this week, or let me work on whatever props I happen to have from my time as a teenager, and let me work on the Vincent routine and put it up for 10 minutes at the comedy club. And oh, that sucked. Oh, that was great. Oh, that and slowly, a show came together that way.
That's a powerful way to walk into the world of magic. First with a summer camp experience to get a lot of hours in, then an amazing show, then endless performing opportunities, then tough performing opportunities, and then coaching with and among some of the best in the world. That's a powerful way into the world of magic.
And I want to emphasize that doesn't stop. So for me, to this day, my career has two distinct paths. There's the path that is building my brand, building my appearance fee to the highest level, really pursuing events that can take care of me and can take care of me well. But there's also the path of where can I go out and just do a ton of shows to get this piece that's an idea, get it in front of an audience 20 or 30 times and find out if it's going to get to stay or not. And I'm still doing that. I'm still doing, there are two dinner shows here in Orlando that are very tourist centered, that are places that I kind of don't want to be seen. Like I don't really put out on social media that I'm working there. I don't put out to my clients because I don't want them to perceive me in a certain price bubble based on that, right? But they're hugely important to constantly developing new material, to in times when things are a little slower, just getting that show count in, because that's really, it's the biggest differentiator I've seen between really great shows and really bad shows is, are they doing the show a lot and are they paying attention?
Totally. One of the questions I was going to ask you is that it seems like all of the material that I see that you upload in some way or another is sharp as ever. Every word is the right word, the word that you know you're going to say, and every moment you've got laughs in it, and you might ad-lib a line if you need it, but it's not necessary. You've got a perfect, flawless script there that cold, and I was wondering if that is 90% in-home rehearsals, or if there's a place where you're still grinding out new material in a way that allows it to transition to second nature.
It's both. It's definitely both. So I do still have a pretty aggressive rehearsal schedule. I do take advantage of, one of the things I love are these magic venues that have sprouted up, and so I've done 3 weeks at House of Cards, and when I know I'm doing a run there, man, you better believe there's going to be in the middle of that set, there's something new that I'm working on, because there are going to be 28 shows. It used to all be scripted on the computer first and then go into rehearsal, and different things are, TV is, I've done not a huge amount. I've done maybe 15 local TV talk show appearances, local morning news when I'm promoting a gig somewhere. Those are all very, very tightly to the beat, because you've got 4 minutes and you've got to talk about what you're doing, and you've got the thing, and it's got to be high impact. The Penn and Teller thing is probably the tightest script, to its detriment as I watch it now, 4 years later. That was probably the this and then this and then this and then this. But that was a safety net too, because what happened was I had been part of a big group that had dinner with Penn and Teller when they were in town a couple of years before that, and sat down and in a large group of people had a conversation with Teller. And I remember my throat kind of getting tight, because these are people I really look up to, and it was kind of intimidating. And having the script in that case, I came out and I had chosen to start with a monologue that was kind of about the show, right? Because I hadn't seen people really do that. It was like, what can I do that's going to, in some small way, stand out and be a little bit different from this mass of Penn and Teller appearances? And so that monologue, that was tight, and that was my safety rope, that I'm walking across, and I could hear Penn's laugh, and I was intentionally not making eye contact with them when I first came out, because I didn't want to feel intimidated. And as soon as I heard that big laugh, I just relaxed. I flowed into it. It was like a relief. It was like, oh, cool, they like this. And now everything, the momentum could just kind of keep going. So when you're in very unfamiliar circumstances, or circumstances that are kind of intimidating, it's all the more important, right?
There is such a power in, and I just released a short episode on this, but there's such a power in having your stuff memorized cold, such a confidence that you get, because the way I like to describe it is it's like you have a superpower now where your mind can now focus on so many more things, take in more, give out more, instead of worrying about what's the next thing I'm going to say. So it's like putting on a hero's cape by just memorizing your script, even if, like you said, if you think back and say like, oh, to my detriment, or even if you have a script which is like, maybe it's not the best script in the world, but it's fine, like, even that will really, really impact your performance and your confidence on stage. So I really resonate with that.
And that's the surprising part, right? It's freedom. Like on one level, you're constricting yourself. I'm going to go with this exact words at this exact moment while I'm doing this exact thing. But you're right. It frees up all of this bandwidth in your brain to really be aware of what's happening with the audience, to really hear where they're laughing, to really hear where they're amazed, because all of that part of you that's normally the hamster wheel, that's, what comes next, that's gone. So you're absolutely right about the power of that. And there is an art to, people talk about, well, I'm afraid of it sounding scripted. I'm afraid of this and that. There is a skill to be learned of really feeling the words as you're saying them for the first time. So there's the part of your brain that knows this is rote, this is locked down, but you're passing it through this filter where you really are thinking what you would be thinking at that moment. You really are feeling those words as you say them. It's hard to describe, but that's the next
acting.
level.
That's why people go to acting school
Yes.
for many years. You mentioned scripting and rehearsal, and I'm always really interested by the process that magicians use for their scripting and what it is that they do. I used to think, I'm better loose. Then I started scripting, and then I was like, of course this is better. And then I spoke to some magicians who I really admire, who I thought must have scripted, and then they said, nah, it just kind of makes its way. I end up with a script, but it starts with whatever I'm saying, whatever I feel like I should be saying in the moment. And everyone's got kind of a different process. And you mentioned scripting and rehearsal as two different things. So can you talk first a little bit about what your process looks like for scripting, and then we'll talk about what rehearsal might look like?
Well, it's funny because there are ways in which I'm experimenting. So there is a very rigid script writing process that I've used for a while, which began with a workshop that Doc Hilford did at that Fitch session on script writing. I still use, and I've kind of changed it, and I've adapted it to my own purposes. I still use that at times. I also find myself now, recording apps are so prevalent, right, that I will sometimes just have the props in my hand, and I'll start doing it as if I'm extemporizing and as if there's an audience there, and I'm recording it. And then there's an app, and I don't remember the name offhand, but where real time giving you a transcription of what you say.
I would love if you can even find out what that app is and let me know even afterwards. I'll put it in the show notes.
We'll do just that. So I use that because that gives me now I've got words on paper that I can cut away, and so that's one way, right? The other way, and this interestingly goes back to that same Roy Benson book and some of what he was writing about structure, and I've kind of expanded it a bit. Benson talked about, you'll notice this in the old vaudeville acts, right? And a great resource on this is Programs of Famous Magicians. Max, I'll find the name and get it in the show notes. It's like a $4 book from Magic Incorporated in Chicago, where basically he's sitting in the back of these theaters in the 20s and 30s, and he's writing down the tricks in the order that they're doing them of all these amazing performers. So Nate Leipzig and on and on and on, and what their act consisted of and what they were wearing and all this other stuff, right? And what you notice is there's a tendency in modern magic to put the most amazing thing at the very end. And they're not doing it. They're putting the most amazing thing second to the end, right? And what I've done is I've and this comes from direct response marketing and some other things, but I have 4 kind of signposts that I'm trying to move an audience through when I'm designing an experience. And that's whether it's a show, that's whether it's an individual trick. And those are focus, rapport, climax, and emotional reaction. So I've got these 4 things that I want to accomplish, right? First, I need to get them looking at me. Then I need to get them, I need to build some rapport and some emotional connection and move them from being just a group of strangers in a room to actually being an audience that's feeling the same thing at the same time. Then I take them somewhere. I deliver something that's really, really amazing. And then at the end, we rock back and we have a moment of just emotional connection that leaves them leaving the theater in a very specific way that I want, right? So the fact that I know that, hey, these are the four phases that I want to move people through, that allows me to do two things. When I'm looking at a show as a whole, I'm able to categorize my material in terms of, is this something that creates focus? Is this something that builds rapport? Is this my big, amazing climatic moment? Is this the emotional connection ending of the show kind of thing, right? So it does that. But it also, that four-part structure exists as a microcosm within the tricks themselves. So in any piece that I'm doing, those four parts will exist to a greater or lesser extent, right? There's something at the beginning, and you can see this really strongly in Eugene Berger's work, right? He always has a hook at the very beginning. There's some line. This is the world's fastest card trick, the history of religion illustrated with playing cards. There's something that grabs your attention and says, oh, what is this? I want to know more about this, right? And so having those four posts, that's a starting point for the writing process as well, because I can start with focus and I can figure out, okay, what is the aspect of this that's the most intriguing or different or weird or supernatural? What's the thing about this that's going to want to make them learn more? What's my hook? And that gives me somewhere to start writing. And now what's the aspect of this that's rapport building? And what's the where is the climax in this trick? Where does that happen? And now that gives me a structure as I'm writing, and it gives me something. I compare it to a sprinter having blocks to push off against. So you're not just facing the empty page when you start writing a script.
That is really, really valuable, both for shaping a show and for shaping a script in itself. It reminds me of Ken Weber's. He's got a few different things. Like if it's not doing one of those things, remove it.
Yep.
On the same note, and this is something that's quite impressive, especially for somebody who does corporate work, but you have quite a bit of like real serious premises. What the tricks are about is often more than just the trick itself. In a lot of the magic that you do, is there a way that you are selecting what the magic is about, aside from just the trick itself?
Yeah, so I think the first layer of that, and it's the generic advice you get from a lot of people, and I think it's really true, is just watch a lot of stuff, read a lot of stuff, be somebody who's curious about the world around you. There's also, something to be said for, and Jonathan Pendragon has talked about this, and I think he's really good at this, of when you're working on a classic, what is this really about, right? And how do we clarify as much as possible that thing that it is and cut away the things that aren't? So I don't have like an easy pat answer, like this is how I do that. But I do think it comes out of that brainstorming process too. And I do think that having that four-part structure helps as well, because it gets you consciously asking the question, what's interesting about this? What is this related to? What is this like? And you can also start from talking about yourself. You can start from not talking about yourself, but thinking about yourself. So like I have a bit, when I do my Pegasus page, I live in Orlando. And I don't know where this came from. And if it started when I was writing the Pegasus page, but the kind of what I talk about at the beginning, and I'm changing this Pegasus page script, or I'm trying to. It's something that's in my notebooks right now. So it may not end up at this, but if you go back to, and I'll be releasing a new one from 2020, but if you go back to my 2018 Magic Castle set, which is on YouTube, that Pegasus page presentation is on there. But somewhere came this idea of, hey, I live in Orlando, which is a really weird town, right, on a lot of levels. But part of it is that our natural resource is the imagination, that Walt Disney bought a bunch of swampland that nobody else wanted because he had an idea for that. And that idea was so powerful that it's attracted millions of people from across the world, across generations. And those are things I say in the thing. So I don't know if that came from thinking about the idea of, the effect as I'm presenting it is somebody imagines something, they imagine this page missing and in an envelope that they've already examined and they've sealed themselves. And that becomes reality. And then, okay, well, what else is related to imagination? I don't know what the process was, if it came from that or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. So part of it is being really clear on what is the effect, right? Is the effect that the coin seemed to be here, but it was an illusion the entire time when you vanish a coin, is the effect that it's gone into, a netherworld, is an effect that, and these things don't have to be explicit, of course, but being clear about it yourself gives you, again, something to push off of when it comes time to figuring out what you're going to say.
Talk to me a little bit about the rehearsal schedule that you mentioned.
So there are a couple levels to this. One is just mechanical practice, right? And Eugene Berger was very good in separating out these ideas of practice and rehearsal being different things. When it comes to mechanical practice, I'm a big believer in numbers. I'm a big believer in setting numerical goals and hitting them. So there are a couple different ways of doing this, right? So I have a technique that I like very much for various reasons for cutting to a named card in a memorized deck that I think has some advantages over the traditional approach. And when it came time to really get good with that technique, I had 2 decks of shuffle cards on my coffee table right next to my TV, a memorized deck, and my girlfriend and I watch about an hour and a half of Netflix in the evening just to unwind. So what I would do was I would, look at the top card of the 2 shuffled decks, cut to it, produce it as we're watching TV, then do that with the second card, then the third card. And it would take me in the time of that hour and a half-ish of Netflix, I would get through 2 decks. So doing that every night consistently, you're doing the technique 104 times. So if you can get that on a nightly basis, and it's something you can do if you're traveling, if you're not, over the course of a month, that becomes around 3,000 reps. But if I told you, here's the key, if I told you, okay, I need you to do this thing 3,000 times this month and record it, that's very intimidating. And that's very like, oh, I don't know where to start, whatever. But if you find ways to break it down and to make it very mechanical and to incorporate it into the other things that you're doing in your life, those mechanical aspects become very easy to master to a very high level. Nothing that we're going to learn in magic is harder than walking. Right? Learning to walk is this amazingly difficult thing that we've all accomplished. So we all have this ability to do really remarkable things with our body that are incredibly hard. And it's just it's choosing the time and focusing, and you can do it, whatever the technique is. So that's the mechanical part. And I always set numerical goals. So I have an accountability group that I'm part of for the business side of what I do, but I'll always in our list of the things we're going to accomplish that week, if I'm working on something that has a strong technical element, the bottom of that list is I'm going to have 50 reps of silk and silver, or whatever it is that I'm working on. There's a specific number, and I've got a piece of paper right in my practice area where I'm just doing that tick system, but recording it and knowing how many times you've done it, because it's very easy to be like, oh, I've done this 1 billion times, and you haven't. You only have if you've counted it and recorded it and know it's there. So that's for that. For rehearsal, I'm a big believer. One of the biggest obstacles is just set up and take down. So I'm a big believer. When I'm working on a new piece, and my life partner is not fond of this, but I carve out a space and I set up the show and the props, and they're there for a week. And I will take, whatever time goals I've set, I'll go and I'll do the trick in the space with the things, There's no super hack to it, but it's just being very deliberate about it and making it a priority. And it's very easy, when we slip into the business side, when we become professionals, there's this constant demand because there's always more that you can be doing to grow the business. So there's this guilt in the back of your head of, oh man, if I'm not, emailing prospects, if I'm not working on a new ad, if I'm not, whatever the case may be, I'm hurting my bottom line. And I do think that's where we tend to slip, because we stop paying as much attention to the show because, that time feels kind of stolen. And it's what we love. It's what we enjoy anyways, if we're into this. And so I do think it's a matter of making it a priority and being very conscious about it. And there's another side of that too, which is I am a big believer in mental rehearsal as well, which is, and I tend to do, a lot of this is stuff that I'll be very honest, I tend to do when I have a specific goal in mind. if I have the Magic Castle booked, if I'm doing Penn and Teller, but you can choose what those are for yourself, right? And those were still there, and they were very different 10, 15 years ago. But having that specific thing that you're preparing for that really matters to you, I think is helpful. The other thing is, when you're talking about mental rehearsal, I will, and this is scheduled, lay down on the couch and imagine my show. Like I'm on stage, I see the audience, I give the lines, everything is flowing perfectly, the props are where they need to be, the beats are right. And I do think that's an important component as well.
To visualize what the thing looks like before it exists is a skill that is real hard, and the more that you practice it, the more amazing the results are. It is an incredibly challenging thing to do, but it is incredibly, incredibly valuable. I wanted to chat with you about the way that you select material. I've gone through a challenge. There was a small portion of when I started performing on stage that I was doing a lot of mentalism. And I did a little bit of it, and then I kind of decided that it wasn't really for me. And since my way back into magic and really wanting to focus on performing magic on stage, and defining how that's different from mentalism, it's been quite challenging to find stand-up material that is awesome, right? I started doing things like when I put the chop cup into my act, which I know you do as well. But I put the chop cup into my act because I was like, I need magic with stuff. Like I need things that people can actually see and experience and feel, and that isn't just paper and pens and playing cards and things like that. Like I need actual stuff. And once I started setting that limitation, I found that there was even less stuff to do magic with. There was even less. So it is a real challenge to find great stand-up material, and all of your stuff is really quite strong. Some of it is classics, some of it is neoclassic, some of it is like the thing you did on Penn and Teller's Fool Us, quite original. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you discover and uncover material?
Yeah, absolutely. So books are huge. I'm a huge advocate of books. I'm a huge advocate of old books. If you're looking for great stand-up material, John Booth's Marvels of Mystery is when he made the shift from being a performing magician to being a minister. He published the acts that had taken him around the world in the 40s or 30s, or I'll probably get the decade wrong. But it's stuff that people aren't doing, right? And it's really powerful stuff, and it's taught in a way that forces you to use your own imagination, right? How would I do this? Because it's not just imitating what you see somebody else doing on a screen. Notebooks are really important. So, I still have the sentence in the notebook that led to the Penn and Teller trick, which was I'd really loved Robert Harbin's Card and Bottle. And whenever I saw it, I was like, it was this very visceral trick. This bottle had been examined, and then a playing card was inside it, and it's impossible. It's isolated. It's, all this other stuff. And it felt too good to be a card trick. Like the fact that, and it's the 6 of diamonds was almost like an anticlimax, right? Because it felt like everything else we'd already seen. Pick a card, choose a card, it comes back. So for me, it was writing down, that's cool, Harbin's Card and Bottle. I had also really, really loved Harry Ing's Impossible Objects. But when I saw, there was a great chapter, one of my first real magic books, and I saved up. I was in 7th grade and, saved and got the 3-volume Paul Harris trilogy, which was way out of my depth. But it had a whole section on the Harry Ing bottles. And I loved these, but I was like, this is too cool to just be something that sits on somebody's desk. Right? I wanted a way to create the bottle, as it were, in the context of a magic trick. And so having noted those two things, the connection between them then became kind of natural. Became, what if I did Harbin's trick and instead of being the anticlimax of, it's a 6 of diamonds, which we're all expecting, we're amazed that there's a golf ball in that friggin' jar. And we didn't see this coming. The golf ball doesn't even fit through the opening in the jar. It's impossible for it to even be there. So now we've got this thing that they didn't even see coming that just smacks them in the face. But there's no way I would have gotten to that if I had just read those tricks and be like, that's really cool. I want to do that someday, and then just moved on. It was the fact that I was able to go back through the notebooks and be like, this interests me, this interests me. So there's that, right? And it's funny because I went through a period of all kinds of new stuff and all kinds of different stuff. And now there's more original stuff. I've got a original sequence, a couple of original sequences that open the show, and a couple things that are combinations of, I've taken, again, Roy Benson, I've taken his brilliant approach to the lamp chimney vanish, which is one of these tricks that, if you go back through that Max Abrams book we were talking about with the programs of the famous magicians, used to be done all the time. It was a standard of vaudeville. And people, myself, I think Taylor Hughes and Torkova are the three performers who I know of, and I'm sure I'll hear about more after doing this, but were the only three guys that I know who do that trick. But I've taken that and what makes it very strong, and I've, in a way that makes comedic sense and makes scripted sense, I tag it with a really impossible production of a shot glass. And so it's things like that. It's taking a classic and then exploring it and be like, well, could I do this with it? Like all this stuff, there's no really direct line, right? But I'm a big believer in if you're interested in a plot, if a plot appeals to you, and it's difficult and it can be expensive, and so I'm not preaching this as the only way, because it is not the only way. But one way is instead of just buying whatever's newest, take those same resources and put them into, okay, I'm really into Bill and Lemon. Let me read everything I can about this. How did Billy McComb do this? How did this person do this? How did that? And just seep yourself in it. And it's really hard to come out on the other end of that process with something that isn't invested with yourself in it, and isn't different, and isn't interesting, and isn't stunning. And it comes with asking, what's the core of this, At that first pitch workshop, I was doing a Bill and Orange with a lot of, I was a young, insecure performer, and I was doing all these gags that were at the guest's expense. And Brad Henderson was at that same event. And one of the things he said to me was, he was like, if you just showed me, if you had me sign a dollar bill and you had an orange out there in front of me, and you made the dollar bill vanish, and you said, cut open the orange, and the bill was in there, that would be freaking amazing. And that just idea, that visual, set me on the path of, 16 years later, a Bill and Orange that really is about that changes, so many of these routines are based on the Terry Seabrook burnt bill and wallet dynamic, where it's like, oh, we're going to borrow the biggest bill we can, and oh man, it's in danger, he might lose it, it might be destroyed, what are we going to do? Oh geez, it's in an orange, which is great, and it was amazing in Terry Seabrook's hand, but it doesn't have to be the only way to present that plot, right? And my way to finding a different way of presenting that plot was Brad just saying that. And so now I've got one where the orange is in full view, held by a spectator in a produce bag that's fully visible. The sign bill is fully visible. The sign bill vanishes, and it's in the frickin' orange. It's a different distillation of what that trick is about, and still very funny, but the magic is incredibly clear.
It seems like a lot of the answer is just not only sitting with the ideas, but also being open to playing with an idea and knowing that the real version of it that you're going to do is 9 years, 5 years, 12 years, whatever down the road, after all of your learnings and all of your...
And sucking is really important too.
100%.
Because if you're afraid of sucking, if you're afraid of dying on stage, if you're afraid of being horrible on stage, now we have a way to avoid that, right? One model is you could just buy every trick, and you're not gonna die. People are going to see that and they're going to be like, this is a competent performer. This is fine. That was amazing. They're not going to fall in love with you. And the road to doing stuff that they're really going to fall in love with is you got to put stuff out there that you're going to fall on your face with. And that's why I have the two different sides of my career that ne'er the twain shall meet, right? There's the corporate side. There's the, if I'm doing a big show at a casino or, whatever, you're not going to see the stuff that I'm working on at a mystery dinner show on International Drive in Orlando. But the two have to be there, and you have to be willing to put yourself on the line and to do stuff that's not going to connect with an audience, because then you find the stuff that really does connect with them, and you hit a whole other level of success that you never will if you stay comfortable and safe. But it's important to find the right place and the right context to do it, because every time we get on the stage, we're carrying this burden that we are someone's experience of magic, and that's changing because magic is becoming more prevalent, and that's a good thing. And there are other challenges, and it's harder to get away with, doing what everyone else is doing because magic is so prevalent. But yeah, just knowing that having that willingness to suck, having that willingness to take big risks, having that willingness to fall on your face and learn to then stand back up and win their respect back, doing it as many times as you can, and finding ways of doing that where you're not, ruining it for everyone else. So
I wanted to change gears a little bit and talk about the business side of magic. For a lot of magicians, it's kind of like a black box of how people end up making it and how they end up booking more gigs. And I found that the people that wonder that don't know that the answer is a lot of work and a lot of calling and a lot of emailing and a lot of like they're just like to get good at magic, the answer is perform a lot. To get a lot of bookings, someone's got to be making the calls or sending the emails or doing the ads or whatever it is. So can you run me through just a little bit of how you are booking gigs? And specifically, I just want to call attention to the fact that you've got an accountability group where you're setting goals to pull them off. So there's not a trivial amount of things that you're getting done in a week here for your magic business. This is enough that you're working with people to help your own motivation. And I have something similar for myself to help your motivation and help you keep accountable that you are actually crushing these business goals. So can you talk to me a little bit about what kind of things you do and what a week of business goals or accomplishments might look like for you?
Yeah, the biggest thing, and this is a chronic, I'm not just going to talk about strengths. I'll call out my own weaknesses here too. I think this is true for whenever we're kind of struggling, is the size of the pipeline is incredibly important. And by that, I mean, however many gigs you're getting, however many conversations you're having with people, how many proposals you're putting out there, right? You need to have people that you're in contact with about booking shows at every level of the process constantly. So if it takes you 10 serious conversations about an event to land one, say, as soon as you get a decision about one, as soon as one either books or doesn't book, well, now you need to make sure that there are 10 more people who are starting to find their way through that process that you're going through, right? I've gotten better at it, but it was even more challenging when I was first starting out because I'd get a big show or I'd be on the road for a while, and I wouldn't be doing those things to start those conversations and to get those things going and to get people in the pipeline, as it were, so that I got done with the show and it was like, what now? Oh, I've got to go get some more business. And, now you've got to start from zero.
Business season and performing season.
Yeah.
Duck season, wabbit season.
Consistency, right. And so having that consistency throughout, and discipline is the name of the game, for a lot of us creative types, it's hard to sit down and just do stuff that you don't feel like doing. And, your thing about if it gets scheduled, it gets done is 1,000%, If I had been living by a schedule 8 years ago, I would be in a much better place than I am now. And it took me a lot longer than it should have to figure that out and to really get rigorous about that. And it comes and goes for me personally. So, but that's a huge piece of it. The best sales calls there are the people who are like, hey, that was incredible. When can you be back here next year? So there is an intertwining between the quality of the show and the business side that can't be overlooked. I think that's its own really important thing. But yeah, I wish I had the answers. I kind of seem to go through phases in my career where I'm really focused on aggressively growing the business, or I'm really focused on aggressively growing the show, and I'm just kind of transitioning out of one of those where I've been really focused on the show for basically the past 2 years.
Even what you said so far is a great place to start. Are you a bigger fan of the phone? Are you a bigger fan of the email? Are you kind of collecting email addresses that you're going and reaching out to? Or is there somebody who is helping you do this? Help me understand what it might even look like to prospect and put some more people in the pipeline.
So at this point, it is email. So let me be clear. The advantage of the phone is that people actually listen to their voicemail. It's harder and harder to get them to actually have a conversation with you, right? And you will occasionally, but it's very rare. They will check their voicemail, and they check more voicemails than they do listen to emails. So that's an advantage. I've gone away from it because it was a big energy and time suck. And I've got with the CRM, which is just means, just so everybody's on the same page, just means customer relationship management software that I use that just manages contacts. I've got the ability with templates to, with one or two clicks, send out an email to a prospect that's very, very specific. So there's somebody in a very specific market that I'm in who is making those initial email outreaches to 300 people a day. She's doing 300 emails a day that are a templated thing that's designed to get a conversation started. Out of those 300, about 20 a day will hit a landing page that's specific to that market. And then maybe 3 or 4 will start to ask about pricing. And when that happens, she schedules a phone call with me. And then it's my role to find out what they need, find out if I'm really a fit for them. And then they get a proposal based on that and we follow up. So that's what I mean by the pipeline, is those are the different stages with the outbound stuff. There are other activities that I'm doing. So I'm networking, I'm in different associations and things so that when people come across somebody who needs what I do, I get that referral, or I'm likely to get that referral. But that's the basic structure of the prospecting.
So just so that I can paint a picture for people who don't know, what this kind of thing looks like, 300 people a day, let's say it's 5 days a week. For a month, that means that the outreach is about 6,000 people a month. And for a year, the outreach is 72,000 intro emails sent a year. And whether those numbers are right or not, or whether some months you don't do it and some months you do, I just want to put that in perspective for people who are sitting at home with their arms crossed, wondering why their word of mouth marketing has not been working. And it's because that's not how you fill a calendar, right? You fill a calendar by doing it. Right? By reaching out, whatever it is, whether it means you're calling people every day or emailing people, or whether it means you're going to live in-person events or working on your ad spend, or all of these many, many different things. And there's unlimited different ways to book gigs, but you got to be doing them, or you got to have somebody doing them.
And the trap is to fall into one. So the trap is to, I'm just doing outbound, or, I'm just doing, I'm just networking my butt off, or, I'm just doing Facebook ads. And the strong businesses are the ones that have effective systems in place in all of those areas.
I was just going to say, one of the key things that keeps coming up here is, and it might have been the first time you said it, but I think it's really clear in your kind of business journey, is that word systems. Like, it really feels like knowing, I got 300 going out a day. I have a CRM, where I'm literally managing all of the potential customers that I have. I have templates that are ready to send. My assistant who works with me knows that when we get to this phase, then they schedule a call with me. Like, these are all things that obviously, if you're just getting started, might not exist. But as you start doing more and more performing and really booking more gigs, you start realizing that you not only do you need these systems to keep yourself organized, so you don't just have an endless running to-do list, but you need these systems for, like you said, so you keep the pipeline full, but you also keep the responding to emails full, and it's all full and it's all there. It takes work. Sometimes you got to break it all down and build it back up again, like you would with a trick or with a show.
And the parallels to performing are very real. So when we were talking at the beginning about, are you here for the audience or is the audience here for you? That same mindset is critical when you're on the phone for people. It really has to be, for me, and other people are different. Other people are very aggressive as salespeople. But for me, I have to suspend any desire for the outcome. And I have to really talk to them from a perspective in my head of, is this really right for them? And if it's not, hey, let me send them to, Billy the Amazing Balloon Magician, or let me send them to this person, or let me send them to this. But if it's not a good fit for me, it's not good long-term for my business. They're not going to be happy. I'm not going to be happy. And that's where pipeline comes in too, because if you reach a place where, oh my God, I have to close on this one $5,000 gig, or I'm not going to be able to cover my nut for the month, and I've been at that place in the past, that's when you take gigs that aren't right for you. And that's when you make bad decisions.
You kind of said them both, but I just wanted to reiterate, there is both am I the right person for you? And there's also, are you, the kind of gig that I'm looking for, right? Like, and both of those are important. One saying like, am I going to do a good job here? But two is just like, is this what I'm trying to do here? And like, are you trying to hire me to do something that I am not? And maybe I'll tell you, you need Billy. He's much better at this. Like when people call me for example, when people call me for like kindergarten shows and like, I don't do that. And sure, I could take it if someone's offering me enough money, there's enough kids or whatever, but I'm not going to do a good job. They're not going to like me. They're not going to like magic. I'm not going to want to be there. There's so many things. I would rather give it to my friend who is the best kids magician ever. And I'll say, here, consider it a gift. When you have a show for grown-ups, you can send it my way or not. Hakuna Matata. And that way I feel good about not doing something that I know isn't right for me. Even though there's a maybe big dollar sign on it, who cares? I'm not doing the thing that I know isn't right for me, and I'm instead giving them something that I think is right for them. And that means listening to your customers and what their needs are.
And that self-awareness is so important. One of the most difficult decisions in my career was I stopped doing strolling magic, because what I became aware of was that I freaking hate it. I've once had a client, and this kind of prompted this real soul-searching decision. It was through an agency. They had hired me for 3 hours of strolling for 40 people.
That is crazy, by the way.
It was so, and I don't know if they knew that there were 40 people. I think it was an agency that didn't care. The client was like, this is what we want, and the agency didn't feel empowered to say, no, this is what you need. That's ridiculous, And so the client had this vision of, it was a holiday event for a company, and they were offering them an iPad prize if they did this written game. And so everyone in the room is doing this written game, and I back off at that point. And the meeting planner walks up and is like, hey, we're paying you to be performing right now. And I'm like, no, they want to, they're in the middle of trying to win this iPad, and nobody wants to see a card trick right now, and it's a timed thing. And she was like, no. And that's not, every walk around gig isn't that, but I realized that when I took a big step back, I am not, and there are people who are incredible about this. And I live here in Orlando. Michael Eaton, I've seen, is amazing at this. Coach Kimlott.
Yeah, you guys in Orlando, you guys are full of amazing magicians.
But what makes it, for that context, is these are people who naturally, they can walk up to a group of strangers and make them feel at ease. And it's a connection that's emotional. It doesn't feel like they need anything from them. It's really natural, and it feels really right. And what I realized is that for me, I feel comfortable and natural in front of 200 strangers. And I don't feel that same level of comfort when I'm walking up to 6 people. And I feel comfortable with structure. I feel comfortable with, here is our show. It's Nathan Coe Marsh. Enjoy him. Not, hey, while you guys were talking, let me interrupt you guys and show you guys this thing that you didn't know you wanted to see. So it's that self-awareness that I had a decision to make. Like, I could either become much better at this thing that I naturally wasn't very good at. I could become like, I could increase my level with it. Or I could take that same energy and put it into the thing that I really loved and really enjoyed and was really naturally inclined towards, which was stand-up and platform. And doing that allowed me to be in a much better place career-wise, even if it sucked to be like, oh, there's $1,500 I could have made, and I'm sitting at home, doing nothing. But long-term, that's been a really smart decision for me. And so I think there's a self-awareness thing of really connecting to, what am I good at? What am I not good at? And this is after maybe 10 years in the business. That's an arbitrary number. But after, go do everything when you first start out. Go do everything, figure it out, but then be really honest about the stuff that you don't enjoy doing. Be really honest about the stuff that you're not naturally good at, and just don't do it.
Have one more comment on that thought. It feels like, when a lot of people hear this, and I remember when I used to think this, it feels like if I'm saying no to all of those gigs, then I've got this empty window and all this stuff that I should be doing, but I'm not doing it. Instead, I'm sitting at home. Do I really dislike let's say, mingling Magic so much that I would rather sit at home with my hands in my pockets than do the card tricks that I know that I can do. Like, what am I doing? This is crazy. What you don't realize is any and every step towards specialization and having a niche and being more hyper focused will get you more of the thing that you are good at, right?
Yes.
So all of that time that you're saying no to other things means more focus and more bookings, but just more everything on the thing that you are good at. So it really makes a big impact. And I know it sounds crazy. I've heard people, I remember feeling this way, but I know it sounds crazy that saying no to stuff means yes to more of the other stuff, but it really truly does.
And it comes out of scarcity. It comes out of, again, beating a dead horse, not having the pipeline full enough. That if you've got a full pipeline with the kind of events you want to be doing and you're working really hard to create that, it's not a loss that you're sitting home instead of making that money that night.
With that, we are getting towards the wrap-up end of the episode, and there are some wrap-up questions that we ask to each and every magician who is on the podcast. So the very first one is the endless chain. In order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest who would be fantastic on the podcast. There is, of course, now 2 catches. The first catch is that you have to be able to put us in contact. You can't just say David Copperfield and recommend someone who you don't know. And the second catch is we're now at like 200 and some odd episodes. So we are. There are a lot of people who we have interviewed. So
right. Have you had Jack Goldfinger?
No, have not yet.
Okay. So Jack, number one, an incredible career, incredible performer, really wise, really insightful, really funny. But he also, books the Magic Castle, and so he sees a lot of magic. He has very informed perspectives on what's good and what's not, and might be, helpful for listeners who are trying to get into there.
That's awesome. What a great recommendation. The next thing is about modern magic. So what is something going on in the world of Magic 2020 that you do like, and something going on in the world of Magic 2020 that you do not like?
I love, we touched on it earlier, but I love the proliferation of really high-end Magic venues, Chicago Magic Lounge, House of Cards, the thriving in the Magic Castle, the Magic Castle Cabaret, Marvin's. I think it's really, really good for Magic on a lot of levels. It gives the public the ability to experience it in a really, really great way. It gets performers a reason to raise their game, a reason to take as a project. Hey, I'm going to have this run of 28 shows. Let me put something new in that's going to blow them away. And I think the prevalence of Magic that we've seen, and I know that other guests of yours, because I've heard them, have talked about this, but I think it's really true and bears some repeating, is that I think it's starting to force innovation. I think that there was a time when, okay, I've got my 7 tricks and they're good enough and they get laughs, but people have seen them, man. And I like that forces us to be like, what am I doing that they haven't seen from other people? I really, really like that a lot. What I don't like is I don't like that Magic clubs have done a really bad job of adapting to the internet and finding a value proposition for young magicians to get them to come out and go to local meetings. I think it's a really important experience if you're coming up and developing, and it's one that we're going to lose because I did a 20-city lecture tour in the fall, and they're dying. There are 8 people in a bowling alley, and they're amazing and they're incredible, and it was such a fun experience and an important experience for me. But there are 8 people in the back of a pizza parlor. And the kids who are in that community who are learning Magic are learning it on YouTube, and they're learning it in these other places. And what that means is the mentors, and I don't mean to sound, I'm not a Luddite, I'm not against technology, but everybody's a freaking expert on the internet, and everybody is amazing, and everybody's got an opinion. And if you're a 12-year-old with a deck of cards, you don't know the difference. You don't have the ability to find the guidance to find out the people who really do know from the people who don't. And I think it's very unfortunate. And I think that those same kids are finding their outlet for magic on Instagram and on YouTube, which is great, but there you're competing with just visual stuff that's on a screen that's not happening right here, right now, right in front of you. And it's very unfortunate, and magic will survive. We're an amazing art form. We've been here thousands of years, Max Maven published that great Protocols of the Elders of Magic, which is, on every page for 100 years. Somebody in the magic press declaring that magic is now dead,
right?
Which was just great. So magic's going to be fine, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think it is a disservice to people who are coming up in magic in an unfortunate situation.
That really clicks with me, and it's funny. It feels like you almost said it, but there are, in all these magic clubs, all of these like 8 people in a bowling alley or 12 people in a club that should have 50. The skills and the knowledge amongst those 8 and 12 people is so amazing, and it's so baffling that a young magician could live doors down. They don't know about it. They don't want to go to it. It's not welcoming, and instead they're learning from another internet expert. So that really clicks with me. The last thing is the take-home point. So people have been listening to us talk about magic for quite a little while now, and we've talked about everything from business to scripting to rehearsing to just everything under the sun. If people are to look back and think back to this episode and take home one important thing, what would you like that one thing to be?
Be willing to suck.
Be willing to suck. It is the only way to get good. Where can people find you, and where can people find your magic online?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me nathancoemarsh.com. In there's a little shop section and a little for magicians section. I did a Penguin Live act about a year ago, 30 minutes of a full show and a full instruction on that. I've got some digital notes that are available there as well. And this isn't actually in a shop front, but if you reach out to me either at nathan@ncmarsh.com, and that'll be in the show notes, or through social media, I have a manuscript teaching the trick that I did on Penn and Teller, which comes with separately mailed to you the impossible jar that you need and some other cool stuff. And that goes through not just the method for that, but the background, the scripts, the whole 9 yards. So if you're interested in the way I kind of think about magic and developing material and stuff, I'm proud of how it was documented in that manuscript.
That is awesome, and I know when you came through Toronto, quite a few people took you up on that, and there are some that are working on it quite seriously in the city, and people that have even performed it here too. So really awesome to see that trick coming to life in my city. And even though I missed you, the ripples of you coming by the city can still be felt. And I'll also mention this, and I'm always worried about saying this just because some magicians go and copy things a little too much, but you do have an absolutely incredible website, particularly for the world of corporate magic. It's just everything that it needs to look like and be for a corporate magician and a bigger scale a magician who does those sort of events. So beautiful website. I'm a website fanatic. My favorite thing to do is to rip apart websites and talk about them and what's wrong and what could be better. And yours is fabulous. So
thank you so much.
Really lovely. And with that, Nathan, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. This was amazing, action packed, and so much practical, real world knowledge from somebody who has quite literally walked the walk. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. And of course, a big thank you to everybody at home for listening in, learning, and most importantly, taking action. And what that means this week is going out there and sucking. But that'll mean that you will get better. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, everyone. See you all next Thursday. Peace. Well, there you have it, a fabulous episode with a real working pro. As always, it's important to not just listen to these podcasts for your joy, but to listen to them for things to put into action. Whether you were excited about his business information, whether you were excited about his practice and rehearsal information, or whether you were just motivated to go out there and suck to end up with something that is yours, that is unique, and that is awesome, you must put it into action. And of course, if you can, if you liked it, if you think other people should learn this information, please go out there and share it with the world. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, yell out your front door, tell your local magic club. I don't really care how you do it, but please spread the word to other magicians around the globe. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next Thursday.